1 second. I believe it's live, Steve.
Okay, we can cut out what doesn't, where we don't make sense. Okay. All right. Hi, my name is Stephen Blank. I'm the editor and publisher of Blank Slate Media, and I'd like to welcome everyone to our sit down with County Legislator Delia Deriggi-Whitton, who is running for re-election in the 11th district, the county legislature's 11th district. So I'd like to thank our sponsor, as we always do, Northwell Health, that sponsors these sit downs and our town halls. And we are joined in this sit down by Brandon Duffy, reporter for Blank Slate. This is part of a series of sit downs we are holding with candidates for town and county positions during the 2021 election. So with no further ado, let's get underway. So Delia, why don't you tell us what do you consider, now the district includes Roslyn, Glen Cove, Port Washington, parts of Roslyn, and parts of Glen Cove, Seacliff, and some of those areas, just so people have a frame of reference for what the major issues there are in all those areas. What do you consider the major issues for your district and for the legislature?
Okay, well, hello, Steve. It's good to see you again. And you're right, my district pretty much surrounds Hempstead Harbor, which is a beautiful district to have, but it's also been an environmentally challenging district because, as you know, Hempstead Harbor has had its issues, and it's been my goal to do everything we can to clean up our district as much as possible so Hempstead Harbor can become viable again for clamming and oysters and just for swimming. And that's been a major challenge. I've received millions of dollars for sewer studies and sewer hookups where Nassau County is 90% sewered, and out of the 10% that's not sewered, 90% is in my district. So it's a major issue, especially since we live on our water with the aquifers. And also the fact that, you know, we're surrounded by water and we want to keep it as clean as possible. So Seacliff is one of the areas that has not been sewered in the past. And we've just hooked up the commercial area of Seacliff, and I'm very proud of that. I get very excited about sewers, but the truth of the matter is it's really enabled the businesses to do much better now in Seacliff. Before, they had to worry about emptying septic systems, and many of them were very antiquated. And now we can have restaurants that are free to have more people inside and less worry about, you know, their septic system. Some of them were in their driveways. I had one, believe it or not, that was in the basement of a house, of a building in Seacliff. So it's really enabling both the economic and the environmental improvement of that area. We also did a line that goes down to the sewage treatment plant that we're going to be hooking up various homes to. So it's not going to happen in a year, but it's sort of going to be part of our 10-year outlook for the village of Seacliff to hook up as many homes as we can. People are thrilled about it. That's been one. There have been so many. You know, the pandemic was a real challenge. You know, we've had the highest rate of inoculations, which I'm proud of. We were able to bring vaccine pods early on to our seniors, both at St. Hyacinth's and St. Peter's in Port Washington. So getting testing done was such a big challenge. Now I'm on the County Executive's Economic Advisory Commission. So I've been working with her in the committee with how to handle the American CARES Act. And if any businesses have not heard of it, if you go to Boost Nassau, go to the Nassau County website and go to Boost Nassau, you have to make an appointment and come down to we have it at Eisenhower Park. We have an office set up. It's Field 6, and it's amazing that literally restaurants, barbershops, nail salons, you can come down, fill out the form or fill it out online, and we have a $10,000 grant. So it's not a loan, it's a grant that doesn't have to be paid back, that's available for most businesses. We had the restaurant boost during the pandemic. This is similar to that. If you got that, you can apply again for restaurants, but it is making the difference of saving many, many businesses. And I've been going door to door to different businesses. I went with the county executive. I've gone with different mayors. We're really trying to get the word out there because many businesses don't trust the process, and that's been very frustrating. So I figure by me going and by the county executive and the mayors, at least they know if they're not happy, they can always reach out to us and let us know. And I've gotten very good feedback. There's minimal amount of information that you need to show. You don't have to show even a need, honestly, but it's a really good opportunity to help so many businesses that are teetering on the edge right now. And I really want to see as many of them saved as possible. And that's what this program is for. There's so many different things, our budget, thank God, with the county is actually pretty good. We were having budget hearings now, but I'm happy with we recently got an upgrade, a bond increase with Mood for the first time in 15 years, which I'm very proud of. We really cleaned up the procurement with contracts. That the Inspector General has been a key part of that process. I feel confident, and I lived through the corruption years, but I really feel comfortable now with our procurement system, and the fact that we really have so much information on whoever we're giving a contract to, which was very different from the past. And I guess, I don't know if I'm talking too long, but the most recent challenge we've had is recovering from that remnants of Hurricane Ida. It really hit our area so hard. Sands Point, I have one constituent with 7 feet of sand in his basement. And when it hit Glen Cove, it hit Seacliff so badly. We had a sewer backup in Seacliff. So we had to get to the 5 million documented and damaged. So I also went door to door with other electeds, and we really had people sign up, to show us the amount of damage they have. And we did hit the $5 million mark. We did that in about 2 weeks, which was a lot of work, believe it or not. So now we're.
Let me ask you about the budget for a moment, because there's a lot of discussion with that. Number one, before the Americans CARES Act brought revenue, the federal government, as a result of COVID, has provided Nassau with a significant amount of money for a variety of purposes and for the budget. Prior to this, when the budget was being set for this year, NYFA was financed or refinance county debt to reduce costs.
Mm-hmm.
And that really, were it not for that, according to NYFA's chairman, it would have caused a massive property tax increase and cuts to critical services. And that was the reason that they gave. And members of NYFA said that really the county had not reformed its long-term practices, that a lot more had been done, and that the county didn't have a plan. And this was the criticism coming from NYFA, which most of us know is the agency assigned to oversee Nassau County's finances, going back to the year 2000, 2001, when the county needed a bailout from the state of New York. So my question is, now we have money that's coming in, and county executive has said most people in Nassau should get $375 each from that money to stimulate the economy. The Republicans are proposing the elimination of fees, a variety of fees that were imposed several years ago to balance the budget.
Right.
So let me just take you to the areas of the budget. I think you have been there through most of this. Is NIFA correct that prior to the pandemic and one assumes beyond sort of this windfall or this input of revenue under bad circumstances, but all this revenue that came from the federal government, is the county really on firm ground if the federal government is not providing this type of relief going forward? NIFA says no.
Well, I don't exactly know the date of that last report that you have there from NIFA, but bottom line is what I think really helped were a few factors. Number one, the refinance, getting the declaration of need. I mean, you have to remember we were in the middle of the pandemic, that we didn't know what was going to happen with the businesses. And we did get a declaration of need, which allowed us to refinance. So that right there, in my opinion, was one of the best moves we could have done. I actually don't have the numbers in front of me, but we're saving a significant amount each year on the percentage of interest that we would have been paying. Number two, the sales tax income, believe it or not, is very strong right now. And I really didn't feel that coming before, but thank God we really did very well with the sales tax increase. The American CARES Act gave us $200 million, but it's not used for like operational budget. It's not. It's used in a very specific way. We're using it for the Boost Nassau, which is helping businesses. We're using it for non-for-profits. The only infrastructure we're allowed to use it for is water-based, which is how we're getting money for grants for septic systems and other water, sewer projects. So we just received $200 million from the federal government under the American CARES Act. $100 million is what the county executive is talking about. First of all, to back up a little bit, the committee hired Hofstra, a group through Hofstra, to do a survey. And it came back, with many of our residents saying that they want to see our businesses be helped and our households be helped as their two priorities with the American CARES Act money. So we have been helping the businesses. 65 million, was already allocated through the legislature. Whatever is spent, by the way, has to go through the full legislature, which I really like that idea. That didn't have to happen. We did it. We self-imposed that. So 65 million is already going towards businesses and all that I just mentioned, mainly through Boost Nassau. But the 100 million would be going to households, which is $375 per household that qualifies. And we can get into that later if you want. So there's also been a lot of other changes that I think are putting Nassau County in a better state. The fact that
what NIFA said, according to their projections from October, even with the refinancing of debt, the county could face $111 million deficit in 21, 137 in 22, and 285. And the complaint is that now and in the past, for the past 20 years, there hasn't been a plan to allow the county to meet, not run into these shortages and not need assistance in balancing its budget.
Well,
so and we had guests on a couple of town halls who said that there was a plan in 2010 from NIFA on ways to do that nothing has ever been done to adopt any of their proposals.
Well, I think that would be like the projection of the 5-year plan, which I do support. I think we should have a better one. But I do know that we have made a lot of improvements as far as our own, we've reduced the staffing with the county, which really saved a lot of money. The whole procurement thing really saved a lot with corruption. I mean, there were contracts going out that had absolutely no value to taxpayers, honestly. We've really eliminated those. The sales tax, I'm trying to remember when the sales tax actually came in. October, I think at that point we weren't sure. This is last October. This is not this month. This is last October you're speaking of, Steve, or?
2020, October 2020.
Okay, yeah. So that was when we didn't know what the heck was going on in the world. And we were very worried about sales tax and things like that. I mean, our sales tax surpassed any estimation that any of us had. So I think that I would have to double check on the date that we really saw this. I think we didn't know about the sales tax being so strong till closer to May. So I understand what NIFA was saying at that point. We were all scared to death. We thought we were going to have major layoffs. There was a time when I heard that if we didn't refi, we might have 20% layoffs. It was really a scary time.
But NIFA was talking just about how, basically a plan going forward, independent of it, not including not just the pandemic, was just problems in developing a sound financial system, because the county has been, since for the last 20 years, NIFA is still here.
Right.
I guess you extended NIFA's presence.
No, that was just for oversight, though, Steve. That's not the control period.
No, but I'm saying that you're still having a state agency overseeing the finances.
Right.
And that was extended when you refinanced the bond.
Right. But that's not a control period. That's not we didn't extend their control period. They're just going to oversee the bond, but it's a different role that they're going to play. They're not going to be in control the way they are now because of the refi. I made sure of that because I have two feelings about NIFA. I would love to get rid of them because we don't need them. But on the other hand, the more eyes that look at our budget and look at our money, I'm okay with, to be honest. So I might be the only one who feels that way. But and it does slow things.
Now we're now in the circumstance right now where there is that $100 million, and the county executive has said, let's distribute it 375 to most residents. And now the Republican majority in the legislature is saying, no, let's get rid of the fees that were imposed several years ago in order to balance the budget.
Right.
So you're a Democrat. Are you siding with you support Laura Curran or the Republican majority on this?
All right. Well, first of all, the timing is a big thing. I voted against most of the fees. Also, I really don't like the idea of the fees. I don't. But right now, they submitted this idea, I believe it was either a day before or a day after Laura Curran already presented the budget. It's, I believe, $140 million gap would be created if we did all the fees at once. So what I think there is a surplus, which Laura Curran is also going to be returning to the taxpayers. So I think that she's presenting a tax cut of $70 million for the first year, and then it fades out over 4 years. So that's really to help homeowners who, some are doing fine, some are not from the pandemic. So we're hoping the tax cut would help. That was her initiative. And that's what she wants to do with the surplus. Because right now we're sitting on a very decent surplus. I'm supporting that. Do I like to have a little money in the bank? Yes. But she really wants to give it to the homeowners. So I am supporting that. So we could have even looked into the fees. And I think Laura Curran wants to get rid of a number of the fees. But the timing is really tough. And I think it was maybe done for political reasons to present this idea. If we're doing it now, we don't have, the budget doesn't allow for a $140 million cut. So what I think we're going to do is, now that we know that they will support getting rid of the fees, which the Republicans did put in, that we want to take a look at it, but we want to do it in a mature, reasonable way. We can't just cut it after the budget's been submitted and then risk a financial disaster that makes us cut all, non-mandated programs, cut money to the fire training and everything else. And layoffs, we can't. We need to do it. We have to see what the effect of each fee is on the budget and approach each one, which I think, speaking with Laura, it's something she would really like to do in the future, but we can't do it for this budget. It's just it's not gonna work. So,
And once you cut the fees, that's every year.
Correct.
It's not giving a one-time 375. We're cutting this amount of money that's not going to be collected on an ongoing basis. So how would you replace how is the county going to replace that money?
Well, that's it. And the Republicans offered absolutely no solution to that. So, look, I think that they realized that Laura Kern's probably going to win the county executive race, because I don't think they'd be doing this if they didn't think that. So they wanted to kind of come up with something that would put a hole in her budget after, it was literally within a day or, of her budget and them proposing this. So I think it was their attempt to present something that they know we were never in favor of fees in this to start out with, but do it at a timing that we couldn't adjust quick enough to put it into this year's budget. So again, I would like to see a lot of the fees reduced, but we have to do just that. Find, see if it's viable, see if the surplus, you don't want to rely completely on sales tax either, as you know, Steve, because that can be very volatile, and it was great this year, but it might not be so great next year. So we have to look at exactly how much expense we'd be losing from each fee and see if we're safe on assuming that money can be replaced. And again, they've offered, the Republican majority has offered absolutely not one idea really, except other than not paying for our pension plan, which I don't think is a viable option. That would push the debt for that, or the expense for that, back, and we'd have to pay interest on it. So that's almost like using your credit card, and I don't like that idea. So as much as I would like to see these fees go away, as much as I voted against, I think almost all of them, there was one I think that we allowed because NIFA wanted it. It can't be done the way that they're doing it, in a haphazard way. It has to be done in a well thought out plan, and I hope we can do that in the next year.
Okay. Speaking of the finances and sources of revenue, the county reassessment of property. You had been a critic of Kern moving ahead as quickly as she did, or in terms of reassessing the property. Do you think that is still correct? Do you think that she moved too quickly? And where are we now?
Okay, well, we had to do something with the assessment system in Nassau County. It had been frozen for 10 years, and it absolutely had to be addressed. And I voted to hire a company to do a reassessment, I thought. It was a $5 million contract. I was the only Democrat who voted for that in the Rules Committee. What I think happened is they did not do a reassessment. They did something called a reevaluation. And for $5 million, I thought they were going to go to every household and look at every house and, document everything that goes into an assessment and update our roll. They did not do that. SVS did something called a neighborhood factor as part of their algorithm. I am no genius, but I looked at the neighborhood factor and the implications of that just in Seacliff, because Seacliff is just a village I'm sort of familiar with, obviously. And I can tell you the homes that faced the water were lowered, some of them, and the ones by like the DPW area that would maybe be considered less valuable were raised. And I was like, I think something's off. I really think something's off here. I saw it even in Glen Cove, and Glen Cove didn't really use the roll. Thank God they had their own roll. But some of the areas that were not as desirable were ranked higher as like Morgan Island, which is always known to be one of the higher values. So
Let me, just prefacing this, going into this, and I think Newsday kind of led the way on this.
they did.
They looked at what had happened. So 8 years of when County Executive Mangano was in office, there was no reassessment done on the properties in Nassau County. And during that time, I think Newsday saw those who challenged their assessments saw their price of their homes go down, their tax burden go down. By challenging those who didn't, for the most part, it ended up going up because you take away from some people, the other people are going to have to pick it up. And you ended up with about, and Newsday showed this, there was huge discrepancies in communities, just between same home. And it turned out that about a half were overpaying their taxes, who tended to be more younger, more minority, and about half were overpaying, which tend to be more affluent communities. Then you had that reassessment.
You got to check that, because Newsday has basically retracted that statement. It's not true. The minority communities were hit with this reassessment as much as other communities. It really didn't make it an even playing field, which I had hoped. It really, this reevaluation that we did hurt the minority communities just as much. And
all right, so let's set that aside, though.
No, but even
large numbers of people were, if you didn't challenge your assessment, chances are you were overpaying. And if you did challenge it, then after the reassessment was done, you were underpaying it, and that's why you had a 5-year phase-in.
But honestly, it didn't result that way. And you can check the data, but even Newsday is saying that really wasn't the case as much. There wasn't, some of it was based on whether or not you repealed your taxes, but it wasn't as big of an impact as they had originally reported. And it wasn't that the minority community was suffering. Number one, the reevaluation was based on school districts. So it was basically income neutral, like it didn't have like Hempstead's taxes go down and Locust Valley go up. It didn't work that way. It worked per school district. So, for instance, Seacliff went up more than any other village in Nassau County. It was, as far as the $5,000 increases, we had more homes with $5,000 increases, and Glenwood Landing went down more than any village. So there was an over $1 million shift in the school budget from Glenwood Landing to Seacliff, which makes no sense really. And it didn't matter if you grieved or didn't. It really went by the neighborhood factor for the most part.
So are you saying that we don't have a fairer system now? And it just it still doesn't make sense?
Well, the whole system, let's call it, is the roll, okay? And that's the list of values of houses. I will tell you that I don't think this reevaluation did much to help it. I really don't. And that's when I really tried to get it to be stopped, because I knew, as much as I was in favor of fixing it, I don't think that what they did with the reevaluation worked. I don't think that it made it any more accurate than it was before. However, since the new role has come out, I know the assessment department, which we, by the way, increased, staff tremendously. They have been looking at the role, and they have been working very hard to change the role that they were given by SVS. So do I think the SVS role was more accurate? No. But do I think that the work in the past year and a half, 2 years, has helped a little bit? Absolutely. However, as you know, the role is now frozen. And that, I believe, is from a lawsuit that was brought out, actually from constituents that I had in Sands Point, which also showed, people that face the water in Manhattan were at a lower amount, with the reeval than other people that were, not in this desirable an area of Sands Point. So the roll is frozen again. And I'm hoping, but again, I don't think there's any quick trick. I don't think you can sit there and reeval a school district and move some people up and some people down, not based on grieving or anything else, and come out with a good roll. I think you have to go house by house, and that's what is happening. And now that the roll is frozen, it's giving the assessment department more time. More people have grieved in the last 2 years than ever, from what I understand. And there's nothing wrong with grieving your taxes, but it's really, the reevaluation did not help. I don't think it really just took a bunch of numbers and mixed them up and didn't do what I wanted to see happen. And as you know, I got in trouble for this, but I said it could either be done right or it could be done wrong. And I said it on the record, and I tried to get it to stop before we really could just test the roll a little bit more. So do I give Laura Curran credit for doing the reassessment? Yes. Do I like the way it was done with SVS? And no. So, but it is going to be better because our assessment department is doing what SVS should have done, which is really evaluating each home. But it does take time. And again, that's why it's good that the roll's frozen for a little while.
Okay. I think it was frozen because of COVID, or was that? Or
that's what they're saying, but there was a lawsuit. What's his name? Eric Berliner was the plaintiff, if you want to look it up. He's a resident from Sands Point.
Okay. Is there any thought, the other problem with reassessment or using, the problem of using property tax is, even if you went to every home and even if you assess every home 100% accurately, that people were actually doing it, it's still kind of an unfair tax because it has nothing to do with the person, the homeowner's capacity to pay.
Correct.
Which an income tax would. It could be a fact that somebody has been living in it for a long time, or the neighborhood took an upturn because of the pandemic even, and the values increased. So you can be sitting in a property in a home, and it's always going to be unfair. It's always not going to be based on the ability to pay, but this idea of the property. Is there any thought given to removing and school districts rely on, it's 100%, or mostly large percentage of property tax. Is there any thought to reducing that reliance on property tax, the same way you want to reduce the reliance on sales tax in the overall budget?
Well, I can tell you I have not heard that theory spoken of in the county. I do love someone very dearly. My father used to be the mayor of Glen Cove and judge, and he's in favor of that idea. I hear it quite regularly. I get a lot of complaints from that constituent, but that's one of them. So I hear what you're saying. There seems to be a very negative association with that, and I'm not exactly sure what it is. But there's
the alternative would be an income tax.
Correct. That's what I'm saying.
And the city of New York has an income tax.
Right.
Pay a city income tax. So your property taxes are not that high, and the city doesn't rely on.
Look, I would love to see a study on it, but again, I know there's like tremendous pushback with it, and I'm not really sure what that's based on. I'm not really sure, other than, like you mentioned, some people making a lot of money and living in homes that are moderate, or I don't know. But there is a lot that people really hate that idea from whenever I've heard it brought up in public. But I would love to see a study. I wouldn't be opposed to it. I'm not saying I would be in favor of it until I saw what the study said, but I would love to see. Look, I think we should look at all options of everything going forward. And you're absolutely right. I have some seniors that live in Seacliff, and because of American Water and the assessment that hit us so hard, and then LIPA being decommissioned, and they're on fixed income, so they're getting pushed out of their own homes, which they don't want to leave. That it's their lifelong, work of paying off their homes, and now they're they're really strapped. So I would love to see what, what a real study would show. But again, I can tell you whenever the subject comes up, it's very contentious and it's very, it's almost like people feel like it's un-American or something, but there are so many problems with property tax. And like you said, maybe that would be a more reasonable way to approach it. But I have never seen any study done on it. So I don't know.
I'll hazard a guess. It would be the distribution of the income tax revenue to school districts.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that we know there's a great disparity between school districts. So I think the concern would be the distribution of the money. But that's just my guess. So I'm not giving the interview. But let me ask you, this election, we've written about this, and we just had a town hall on redistricting.
Mm-hmm.
This election right now will probably be the most significant election for the next 10 years.
Correct.
And that's because this election, the new county legislature is going to be determining the voting lines, the
Correct.
district lines for the county legislature. It's the annual census. After every annual census, all the lines get changed, starting from Congress down to state assembly, state senate, as well as Nassau County. The Kevon Abrams has proposed a nonpartisan redistricting commission. The Republicans opposed it 10 years ago and don't appear to be, the comments that I haven't heard the presiding officer, Rich Nicolello, what he is saying currently, but he hasn't said anything to indicate that they're going to do anything than what was done 10 years ago. So this is an election that if the Republicans win, they could lock in a majority for the next decade.
Absolutely. And add to that point, Steve, sorry if I interrupt, that there are more Democratic, enrolled voter or, citizens than there are Republican in Nassau County. Yet the Republican legislature has the majority, like more seats. And it really is done by the gerrymandering that went on 10 years ago with the last redistricting, which I did live through. And now here we are. This 10 years went by so fast, by the way. It was like a blink of an eye. I can't believe it's 10 years already. So, but you're absolutely right. We would have to look up.
Now, do you support an independent redistricting? I asked Kevon this, and I said, because there is a disparity of about 430,000 registered Democrats to 330,000 Republicans, the margin of 100,000.
Which is a lot.
Which is a lot. And there's now 12 of the 19 districts had been Republican majority. I don't know what the outcome is after the census. That could have changed some of the numbers, but it was a 12-7, a 10-9 majority created a 12-7 majority of Republican districts. So what are you going to do about that? If the Republicans go ahead and end up voting on redistricting that preserves, say, the 12-7, what are you going to do about that?
It's such a frustrating process. And like I said, I went through it 10 years ago. So just so everybody understands, the majority that controls the legislature controls the calendar. So that means a tremendous amount. Like I can come up, which happened with, legislation that banned plastic bags, let's say. I couldn't get them to even have a hearing on that because the majority wasn't in favor of it and thought I was being un-American by trying to ban plastic bags. So it's such an important aspect that, again, most people aren't even aware of. And the fact, I really think that a map, whatever party you're on, and I'm coming from, my father was a Republican mayor and judge, and actually my husband's I'm kind of taking politics out of it. I think that the map should show what the demographics show, and it doesn't with this map. So what are our alternatives? I'm hoping that Laura Curran will be the county executive, partially for that reason as well. Again, even just taking myself out of this, because it gives us a little more checks and balances than we had last time when Mangana was the county executive, and and the Republicans had the majority in the legislature.
She can veto the map.
She can.
Okay.
So she has to sign the map from. So we have that as a little bit of an advantage. I think that the census did show that there's an increase. I read that, that there is an increase in possibly more Democratic voters coming. So my hope is that we pick up a couple seats with this election. And, speaking politically again, that was non-political. I think it should match the demographics. The political end of it is the Democrats, although we have, like you just said, 100,000 more voters, registered voters, we really don't come out to vote, especially in non-presidential elections. And I really hope that there's a few districts that are very close, that if the Democrats just showed up to vote, we would really have a good opportunity to take back those seats. So that's really, is it directly in my control? No, but there's a couple campaigns that I'm really trying to push with on the South Shore. Laura Burns is one candidate against Gaylor, and that's very close. So we might pick up one seat possibly. And there are a couple other seats that are within like 10%, which sounds like a lot, but it really comes down to like less than 2,000 votes. It's like 1,500 votes. So if you want to have your voice heard and be represented, you have to vote.
So let me ask you, just as an idea, because I asked Yvonne this question. If there's a margin, was the basis of how you're going to redistrict? Is it going to be based on political allegiance, or do you use the criteria of geography? Because if you look, you are one of 4 county legislators who represent a part of Roslyn.
Correct. Right.
There is no geographic continuity where you have a representative for the area. Should that be a factor? It's also, you now have Nassau County is 42% minority according to the latest census. Should that somehow be reflected in how the districts are drawn? Is geography and demographics, should those be the factors rather than party identification?
Well, that is part of the description. If you read it, it's contiguous, and if you look at our map from the last time, oh my God, there are some really bizarre looking districts. It's anything but, contiguous. It might be continuous, but it's not contiguous. And I do. All right. So let's see Roslyn. This sounds really funny, but there are advantages to having a number of different legislators, so I can't say that they're at a disadvantage because they have so many legislators, because we each get like a pocket of money sometimes, and we've all sort of, kept our eye on Roslyn. So there might be some advantages to that scenario, but I do agree that, the map, the way it's drawn now, doesn't make sense. I have a big map in my office, and I'm constantly looking at it because, you can't tell. Sometimes one road is in my district, like in Seacliff, one side of the road is in my district, the other side is in Josh Lafsette's district. It's very frustrating because people think it's you, and they and then if you tell them, oh wait, that's not my district, they're like, well, you're handling this across the street. But anyway, I think that it should, more importantly than geographics, I think demographics are what have to be represented because there's different needs in different communities. It's a lot of people that, really rely on programs and things like that that might not always have a loud enough voice because, as you know, in the past, whenever there's a problem with the budget, the first thing to go are the non-mandated expenses. And, that's so easily said because a lot of, I don't want to say they don't care, but it's not as important to some other legislators. Whereas if you're representing people that are more dependent on after school programs or whatever, then that would become a bigger priority. So I think the demographics is more important than the geographics, personally.
In terms of now, there was some legislation that was controversial where Democrats among themselves disagreed, which was to make police a protected class, and which would they could have opportunity to sue people who are harassing them.
I'm so glad you brought that up, Steve, because that's completely wrong. That piece of legislation was passed in 2019. They're already part of a special class. It was passed unanimously with all 19 voters and all 19 legislators, and all 19 of us are signed on to that piece of legislation. So as we sit here today, the police are in that protected class.
So what was changing with the legislation?
Very, 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 very little. And in fact, I wanted to talk to you about this earlier, but I just didn't get a chance to call you. One thing that you probably would like about that piece of legislation is it limited, not minimum, but maximum amount of judgment to be $25,000 per incident. Now, this is what it's doing. They're already special class. That did not happen with this last vote, 2019. Police have had the right to sue civilly since 1996. The only thing that they can sue for, which is the same thing as us, is controlled by the penal law. So that's harassment, menacing, and physical injury, okay? So everything, I would say 95% of what was in that bill is already law. And I'll tell you something right now, Fred Brewington and a number of other people know that. They knew that. But that day at the legislature, they were saying over and over again that we were now making them a special class. And they didn't want to hear it. Every time I brought up the fact that they already were a special class, they totally would not let me speak or anyone else. So what that did, as far as the lawsuits go, if God forbid somebody hit somebody or, if you walk up to a police officer and hit him over the head with a brick, that law actually limited the amount that someone could be sued for to $25,000. Guess what? That's out the window now. They can sue for $1 million, which they probably would. So plus we had something in place. Now I did not write this piece of legislation. I really didn't even think of it, honestly, until it came in front of me. But looking at it and knowing that 95% of it's already in place, and that the county attorney was going to take a look at the lawsuits before they could go forward, which I think is a good idea because it would sort of eliminate any frivolous lawsuits. And it limited the amount that someone could be sued for. Now, $25,000 sounds like a lot of money, but compared to what $1 million, which is what it will be now, it was a lot less than, and I don't think anyone realized it. And I don't even think the unions or anybody realized that until afterwards. And now they might not be so supportive of this legislation.
Well, what would harassing police entail?
It's defined by the penal law.
What is that?
It's not just saying stop hurting this person. It's not. There's a threshold, and it would be up to a judge, which it is now. It is now. You can be charged with or sued for harassing a police officer today. It would be showing up at their homes. It would be spitting on them, or actually spitting might actually, because I got to tell you, I don't know if you have a minute to talk about this, but I'm ranking on public safety. And I speak to a lot of police officers. A lot of them that I speak with are young, and they're starting out. And they think of me as their mother, but like that age kind of relationship. And a lot of them are very upset because they feel like people look at them as the enemy. And these guys are not, and women are not making a ton of money. They're not. They're making, maybe 50,000 sometimes, for a long time. Some people make a lot of money, but it takes a while. The morale is horrible, 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 horrible. And they feel that this isn't what they signed up for. They have 17 more years to go, and they don't know what to do. I mean,
but the Nassau police are making more money and have a better compensation than virtually any police force. You have dozens and dozens of people making more than 200,000 a year.
Correct, but I'm talking about. Let's talk about the future, okay? Let's talk about these young kids that just come out of the police academy, okay? Many of them have, we require college. They have college loans. A lot of them are trying to buy a house. They're not making a ton of money at that stage. I agree with you that once you're there 20 years, you really do well. But this is the next generation, which is, as a mother, this is what I think about, not so much us. So they're not making the money that we're talking about. They're doing okay, but not great. But all of a sudden, they're being treated in a way that I don't think has ever happened. And I saw it even in our meeting. They're listening to so many people screaming at them and coming up to them and really saying things to them that are very hurtful. And look, I am fully 100%. I want everyone to feel they can express their First Amendment right. I support that with my heart. However, what I was thinking that this might help with is support, say what you want to say, express your feelings, but don't do so in a way that's going to harm the police officer.
Do you think a lot of this came from the Black Lives Matter response, where police actions came under fire in places? We know in Nassau that we were rated again. Nassau was rated again the safest county in the United States.
Correct.
For its size. So obviously they're doing a good job. But do you think that, did you agree with the Black Lives Matter movement? Did you think that Blacks were being treated differently across the country? It may not be true here.
Correct. Right.
It may not be true here, which it would have been helpful if they were wearing body cameras.
Yes.
If the police here had been wearing body cameras, so people could have more confidence, and that this was done. But do you disagree with the Black Lives Matter movement?
No. What I think is that Nassau County, yes, we're rated, safest county for our size, but we also put more into training, and we require more education, and we really spend a good amount to have the right, the right environment and the right procedures in place. I'm happy to say I fought for 7 years to get body cameras. We couldn't get them. We finally got them. Actually, I heard they were just starting to roll out this week with the superior officers and a few other ones. I think us getting body cameras was a huge win. Unfortunately, it didn't seem to be enough, or didn't seem to impress people, but someone who's involved in this, and I think it's going to help on both sides, because I think it's been proven to be a deterrent for people to, if they see the body cam, sometimes it stops the situation a little bit quicker than if there is no body cam. The police officers are fully aware that they're wearing them, so I think it's going to have a lot of good implications on it. And I'm very happy that we got it. And it was a huge expense for the county, but I supported it because I think it's worthwhile. I don't know, Steve, I'm at a point right now where I think that our nation is so divided on both sides. And I think that it's time to kind of come together a little bit more. And that's what I saw this piece of legislation being. And I probably wouldn't have been aware of what's been going on with some police officers had I not had my job, and I had not had the contact with them. And the morale, what happens with morale with police officers, and you can say, oh, you took an oath and, oh, you wear a uniform, so you should just do what you have to do. But there's a lot of police work that involves being proactive and going that extra mile to find the guns or find the gang members and all this. And with the morale being so low, and with them honestly telling me they're afraid to be interactive sometimes, what happens? They retract, and they're hesitant to pull over that car that they have a funny feeling about, or, and who suffers from that the most? But those communities that are really on the fringe, it's the Uniondale who has a gang issue. It's not so much, honestly, even my district, maybe, like in Sands Point and Port Washington, we're not going to feel it as quickly, but some of these communities that really rely on the police more than you realize are going to be the ones who feel it. And what's interesting, it was a New York Times poll, and there was an article, maybe it was, I believe it was about maybe like 8 or 9 months ago, that showed that really a lot of the residents of minority communities support the police, even during the Black Lives Matter, more than other communities, because they know how dependent they are on them, and they know how important it is that they're respected and operating correctly for their communities to survive. So, look, we all witnessed a horrible murder, and I've never seen anyone be killed before. It was horrible, and that that jarred all of us. But I think that we have to be fair to the fact that we're in a different situation for the most part with training and everything else up here. Are there bad situations in Nassau County? I'm sure, but I would much rather have the system we have in place. Some of the rest of the country is just trying to get up to where we are, So again, with the thought of coming together a little bit, all this legislation said is, look, these are the laws, and you guys should be aware of them. If you're not, you can get in trouble if you harm a police officer. And there's a volunteer fireman in Glen Cove that was stabbed at a protest, and he's a young police officer in Manhattan. But even our police medics are coming to me saying things that they're being cursed out at and things like that. They drive an ambulance, but they're in a uniform, and in the last 2 years, it's really been very difficult for them. So what was my goal with that, supporting that, was to say, speak your First Amendment. There's nothing in this that changes your right for First Amendment rights, but just do so in a way that doesn't cause harm to first responders. And that's how I saw it, and that's why I voted for it. And I really think that's what we have to do as a nation. We have to, at this point, just come together a little bit.
Do you think one thing that has been cited on the other side is the qualified immunity given to police that prevents them from being sued? And some of that is saying that if they could be sued, that it's kind of like malpractice for a doctor.
Right.
It prevents or identifies the bad apples. And that's not necessarily in Nassau, but in other places. But it's been cited as it's an exemption from prosecution or somebody filing a civil suit that is afforded nobody else, including emergency room doctors. They have to get insurance for malpractice, because if they do something egregious, they can be sued. And I think the idea is it's a deterrent for doctors for bad behavior on the part of doctors or doctors not taking care. What's your feeling on the idea of eliminating qualified immunity?
I don't think that we can with police officers. And we're having a hard time filling our classes right now. You got to remember, they come out making $39,000 a year. They make $50,000 as for a while. They're not coming out of the academy making $200,000 a year. And then you want them to buy a malpractice insurance. You're not going to get anyone to become a police officer. We're having a hard enough time filling the classes now. And that's a good job, but people don't want it right now because of everything that's going on. I mean, you can check the records. You don't have to rely on what I'm telling you, but they're having a hard time filling the academies. So I don't think that, I know that they did it in Manhattan. I don't think that we should be requiring police officers to carry malpractice insurance. And I got to tell you something, which I have an issue with Fred Brewington. He doesn't support that either. And the reason being is because he likes the county to be physically responsible, in my opinion. He didn't support that idea, and that gave me a real credibility question in my mind when dealing with him. He was in favor of a lot of other changes, but not that. So look, I think that to ask police officers who don't make a ton of money to pay for their own liability insurance is not the answer. I think the answer is the body cameras, which is going to really show, what happens, and continued training and continued sensitivity training. And we got 5 additional days of training, through the police reform. And I would really like to see that used in the right way. I attended a Holocaust Museum training program, which they also give to first responders. And it really resonated. And I hope that, I've talked to many, other legislators. Denise Ford and I work together. And that's what I would like to see moving forward, is to continue sensitivity training. I'd also like to offer, any type of help that we can give our first responders, not only the police, but look at the police medics. I lost a 56-year-old cousin who I was his health proxy. And it was right in the beginning of COVID, and we didn't even know it was transmitted by air. And they went into his bedroom and pulled him out, no masks, and they did that over and over and over again during COVID, and they saw so much. Even just my own family saw so much with that episode, because he didn't want to go to the hospital. He was fine. And my aunt was involved. It was a whole nightmare. And they experienced that over and over again with COVID. The police experience a lot of stress now and always. So I would like to
ask
see
a question on COVID. Should police be required to be vaccinated?
That's a new, it's a new world with this
But
vaccine.
you're pointing out they're coming in contact with people.
Yeah.
So potentially, if they're not vaccinated, they can do it. New York City is requiring everybody to be vaccinated. And Northwell just fired
20 people,
staff, that didn't. Should first responders be required as well because of their proximity to the public?
Well, I can tell you this. I was with the county executive last night, and a similar question came up, and I know that they're looking at the different requirements. I got vaccinated. I have to tell you, I'm not a big vaccination person. My kids are vaccinated, but I had an issue with one of my daughters having a severe reaction to it. We actually lost our family dog after getting a rabies vaccination. So I understand some of the hesitancy that some people have, but it's gonna be an interesting topic going forward, because again, I weighed the risk and the reward, and I really thought for my family it was the right thing to do. But I'm hearing from a lot of people that they don't like to be told what to do. And then you get to the point where you say, what's more important? Of course your own rights are important. This is a philosophical question. I don't know what the answer is, Steve, but our nation's being faced with this. Is it the better good for our society that matters more than your individual will? And I'm not the one to answer that question.
How do you square that with the fact that in order to go to kindergarten, kids have to get 6 shots?
Well, there are exemptions for that. They used to have a religious exemption, which they just got rid of because of.
Would you want kids unvaccinated without the vaccine for measles, mumps, and chickenpox?
No, that's the thing. Why do we do it? Because it's the better good for society. I got my kids vaccinated. I did it.
Why would COVID be any different with 700,000 Americans dead?
Well, I think that the education has to come up a little bit more with what happened. And I read something that I thought was interesting, which is just that this vaccine was not developed in a year. They had the basics for this COVID vaccine, for the last 10 years. They've been working on it. And I think that rush is what made people nervous. I think the misinformation that was put out by our last, administration in Washington really led to a lot of distrust of the whole situation. And I think that there's no magic wand for this, but that people have to come around and trust what the process has been and show that it's safe. I don't know. I don't know why so many healthcare workers are leery of it. But now I just heard that 93% or something like that are vaccinated. So it seems like they
with a mandate. Without the mandate, it was like 73%. And then when they announced that you'll lose your job unless you go ahead and do that. So that's what I'm saying. And that's what they did at Northwell. And that's what they're doing at airlines. Why not for first responders who come in contact with the public?
Well, again, I'm sure that it's something that's being discussed, and I don't. It's
I add teachers to that class as well.
I know. Well, it's going to be interesting to see how it goes. I got to tell you, there've been meetings at our school boards just with the masks that were so heated and so, oh my God, 1:00 or 11:30 at night they ended with neighbors being so upset with other neighbors, and I don't know. I'm getting off Nassau County here, but I look at it as, look, whether it was intentional or whether it was a mistake or whether it came from a wet market, who the heck knows? But we're in sort of a war. We're in a survival situation. 1 in 500 people have died from this virus. And my gut feeling is, we have to all fight to protect not only our families and ourselves, but each other in our communities. So again, I wouldn't be surprised. It's not my decision to make, but unless this magically goes away one day, which it hasn't happened, I think that I wouldn't be surprised to see more and more mandates.
Switching gears, downtowns.
Mm-hmm.
So downtowns are kind of the backbone of these communities. You mentioned Seacliff and Glen Cove, and in those you have residences and it goes around a business community, and you get those amenities. They've been hard hit before the pandemic. Retail has, brick and mortar storefronts have had difficulties going back. There has been money made available by Nassau County, as you pointed out.
Mm-hmm.
But what do you see in terms of supporting the downtown business districts, the regional business districts, the village of Roslyn and Seacliff and Glen Cove? What role ought the county be playing in speeding development?
There's a lot of different ideas. I'm doing a major project in Manor Haven, which is part of Port Washington. Well, that, in my opinion, has always been kind of undervalued. And we're doing a lot of work with making it more walkable and, again, fixing drainage and all this other stuff, but really just trying to make it more attractive for businesses. I think that we need to put in the revenue to help just the physical changes in the businesses that are, in the areas like parking or anything else, just to make it enable it, which I'm doing in that area, which I'm really looking forward to seeing, hopefully a good transition with that economy there. I think that these permits for outdoor eating, I think well after the pandemic, I think people love to eat outside. It's a European feel sometimes, but I love it. And I know you and I spoke about it. Not every spot is logistically set up to do it, but you'd be surprised. Like Port Washington, we have Main Street, and no one ever thought we could close Main Street for anything. And now we close it every other week. We close half North Main, we call it, or South Main. Everyone loves this whole idea. It helps the businesses. It's helping neighbors come out and see each other, and which we really needed more than we realized before the pandemic. I think we really need that social interaction. So I think making those permits more readily available. Glen Cove has been closing the streets for years, and it's amazing. The restaurants support it. Everyone loves the idea. So I think making those permits a little bit more accessible will help with that, making it a more permanent idea. I also think, like for instance, with the 375 that we're trying to give out, from the American Cares Act to people. We're saying it with the caveat, which is obviously we have no control over what you spend it on, but just please try to spend it locally. If it's restaurants or stores or a service for a local business, because sometimes I know, look, I have kids, they can run out of something and have it delivered at the door before I can even know that we're run out of it. It's amazing how Prime and all this stuff works. I don't really use it that often, to be honest, but it's the conscious decision of, if you want downtowns and you want businesses, then you need to make that a priority in your spending. And it might take a little bit extra time, or sometimes it's a little more money, sometimes it's not, but just make the effort to spend money locally. So,
Brandon, as usual, I've monopolized the conversation. Is there anything that I've missed that you'd like to ask?
I think you've hit everything on the head, Steve.
Okay. So the final question is, why should voters vote for you for re-election as opposed to voting for your opponent?
well, I think part of it is that I have a lot of experience with being a legislator. There's a lot involved with not only the budget and projects. I actually have 3 major projects that I've been fighting for that are coming up. One starting any day in Manor Haven, like we mentioned, and then I have one in a Glen Cove area and one in a Seacliff area that are all pertaining to roads, but making them more economically viable at the same time. And, I was a councilwoman prior. After college, I worked in the private sector, which also I think really, really instilled in me, what money, how to have a balanced budget and things like that. And to start out as a legislator without any prior experience is a big undertaking. And I think the experience does help. I think that my record, and I always hate talking about myself, but I think my record shows that I really have been able to work with both sides of the aisle. My district's only 52% Democratic, and I usually win anywhere from 70 to 74%, I think I forgot, but it's somewhere around there. So I really do get a lot of cross the board votes. And I think it's because people feel that they can relate to me and that they know that I got to tell you, I really put a lot of time and effort into this job. I love my job. And I, even if we do go away, I always have my phone. I always have my emails. I feel like it's almost like a baby. Like you don't want to leave it for too long because something might go wrong. And especially during the pandemic, I really spent so much time, not only with getting tests and getting vaccines, but I went to work with, I couldn't stay home. And I went to many of the press conferences with Laura Curran just to be supportive of her and also to speak to the top specialists. But I also did a lot of the work with distributing food, not only through Island Harvest, but I set up a program with just our neighbors. And we really give out some really good packages. There were 600 deliveries that we made personally that we, most of it wasn't donated. Some of it was, but, so I think people really see that between that. And then I also run the largest toy collection for Toys for Tots in the nation with another friend of mine. It's at the Coliseum. I'm doing a plug December 5th if anybody wants to drop off toys. And, I think people recognize that. And finally, the other thing I do personally is I have a daughter with type 1 diabetes. She's 24 now. She was diagnosed when she was 3. And we've raised over $1 million for diabetes. And we've had different dinners and car shows. And it's, I'm on the board there. And, being a mom and worrying about the future for the kids, but also really being involved with trying to cure diabetes has been, that I would give anything in the world to cure diabetes. I would give up everything to get that. So I think people can relate to that, because when you really have, I was a single mom for 10 years. Like there are a lot of things I think people can relate to that that make you take everything very serious, sometimes maybe too serious. I think I worry a lot about constituents and everyone else, but it makes you real, and it makes you conscious of the decisions you make and the impact they have on people's lives. So again, life has kind of brought me to a point where I think I'm very aware of a lot of different angles of life. And I'm sort of grateful because I think it's made me a better legislator.
Well, I want to thank you again for taking the time, and those who attended. I would also like to thank Northwell for sponsoring today's discussion. For those who didn't watch, and mostly a recording of this discussion can be found on Blank Slate's, will be found on Blank Slate's website, Facebook page, our YouTube channel. You'll also be able to go to our YouTube channel directly to sign up. And a story about our interview will be written by Brandon. That'll appear in our upcoming issue on October 8th. And if you are not already, we hope you will support local journalism by subscribing to this newspaper. And you can do so on our website, The Island Now. Again, I'd like to thank Delia Deriggi-Whitton, county legislator for District 11, running for re-election in the time you've taken. Thank you, Delia.
Anytime, Steve. It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, talk to you later.